Hello, students of history. So, in today's lecture, we're going to begin looking at the great European age of exploration. And we're going to see how Prince Henry the Navigator begins thinking about alternative routes to the Far East in order to pursue lucrative trade with China and India and parties throughout the Middle East, and trying to bypass certain Italian and Muslim merchants throughout the Mediterranean basin. And within this thought of this idea of going to the East, we're going to discover all kinds of new things. That Christopher Columbus is eventually, in 1492, when he sailed the ocean blue, that he is going to discover a new world. Though he's not going to recognize he discovered a new world, he's going to believe he discovered the Far East. And we're going to dispel some myths about the world, that it was that Europeans or anyone really believed that it was flat. We're gonna talk about the civilizations that Christopher Columbus and subsequent explorers met as they traversed the New World, and Ferdinand Magellan, who circumnavigates the world, though he, of course, himself dies on the voyage and doesn't make it. I'm sorry for the spoiler. But nevertheless, this is a tremendously important time within European and world history, because this is a relinking of peoples who had not been united for many tens of thousands of years. And there's going to be a vast exchange of goods, of ideas, of disease, and it's going to be problematic and good in many ways. But it's going to be tremendously bad in other ways. Lots of people will meet their end and suffer from the consequences of this exchange. But nevertheless, we will ask ourselves, what brought about this age of exploration from Europeans who earnestly desired to explore the world? And over the course of a century, they transformed from sort of the backwater of the world into a thriving and powerful, a rich region of the world. That it really goes from being almost a nobody in the world to being one of the most important and more importantly, an imperial power in the New World, that will bring about the earliest colonization of North America. And we will then be getting into our own time within the history of the United States, at least the colonial history of the United States. So I invite you to follow along in these slides that are to come. So welcome back. We're now going to begin looking at the age of exploration. And I just want to start by thinking about those people in Europe who decided to traverse the globe. What were their motivations? What drives a group of people, a small, motivated group of people, to sail into lands unknown, to go and encounter cultures that they had no idea who they were about to meet? They spoke not the languages of these people. What motivations are behind this? What is driving this push, this quest to explore the world, to find new routes to new places? And I think that we should never, ever underestimate the human condition, that the human beings are curious and interested people, that they want to know new things about new people and new places, and just simply discover things for the sake of discovering them, to go on adventures, to travel. So never discount or underestimate this motivation of simply adventure for adventure's sake. Secondly, I think knowledge, that we often see people who will go places, will do things, that they will traverse the world, that they will go into the unknown in order to learn new things about the world, to discover new ways to new places. So there is a very vital component about expanding the knowledge of one's culture and one's society. And we will come to find out the question was, Africa was so large, there was competing theories whether Africa ended at all, whether Africa was vast, so vast that there was no end to the continent of Africa. So the Portuguese began exploring, that they began finding their way down the coast of Africa in order to discern this question. So the advancement of human knowledge. Fame and fortune is also very important. Here, if you discover new trade routes, if you discover new ways to the Far East, if you discover new lands, new islands, new ways that great European kingdoms can make money, that they can advance their economics, advance the economic fame of the monarchy. It also advances the fame of the individual who discovered, and you were rewarded for this. Hernan Cortez, for instance, he will be one who gets a lordship. He advances himself from a very low, middling sort of fellow to one who has a title and lands that are from the monarchy of Spain. Never underestimate, I think in our own modern age, we often say that religion does not play a big factor in motivations, and it's very much just a side note to the real motivations behind things. But this is an age in the 15th and 16th century where advancing the Christian religion was enormously important to many of the people who are exploring and adventuring, and especially those who will come afterwards. We see many friars that are who are eager to take the gospel throughout the New World. And don't underestimate the drive to advance the Christian religion, to bring the gospel to all these people who had never heard it. But finally, I would say economics is a key driver in the age of exploration. And especially when we are discussing the European age of exploration, that there is an insatiable demand in Europe for luxury goods, fine silks and cloths, dyes, spices, foods, sugars, things that are luxury items. This is not a attempt to discover new trade routes in order for a mass economy or scale to a mass economy, that you're not going to go to find gloves and clothes and these kinds of things, or at least not ordinary clothes. But this is a luxury trade that China, much like our own time, is the economic engine of the world, that they are producing the vast majority of the goods in the world, and everyone needs to go to China in order to secure these trade goods. And in order to get to China, before it was discovered you could sail around Africa, of course you have to go through many, many middlemen in order to do this, which it greatly inflates the price. So if you can find a way around all of these middlemen and go straight to the source, you can get, of course, cut out an enormous amount of money from the items that you have that you have to pay for, and the merchant that leaves from Europe can of course make vast amounts of money through this, and by this you can cut out all your competition in the Italians and Muslim merchants. So let us, before we begin examining the European age of exploration, let us look back just for a moment in time and think about kind of the precursors to the formal age of exploration in the history books. So think of the Nordic peoples, often referred to as Vikings, as being kind of the first European explorers. And Leif Erikson, and Eric the Red's son, was one who we learned through the great sagas of the Icelanders came to discover Vinland, we think. Certainly to discover Greenland, but he may have actually discovered, and archaeological evidence suggests, I think, that the Vikings were among the first settlers to ever discover the New World. So sorry, Christopher Columbus, but Leif Erikson probably beat you to the punch by about 500 years. Alas. Nevertheless, this settlement was not successful, and it did not lead to the exploitation of the New World in near the same way that did the Columbian Exchange. But nevertheless, this took enormous efforts, and the The Nordic explorers were ones who had to sail across vast distances of the northern Atlantic Ocean in completely open ships, as you can see here in the Viking longship, which are great seaworthy vessels that you could sail up rivers in, traverse very easily, and you could portage. You could take your ship out of the water and carry it because they were not enormously heavy, but nevertheless, they still had to sail across enormous expanses of water, navigating away from land. And this is a huge no-no in the ancient world. That how did you navigate? Well, you navigated by seeing where you were going with the land. So the Vikings had to be very excellent sailors to sail and traverse open waters, to navigate by stars and very primitive means, rowing against currents many times, or using their sails and oars. But this is very hard work, very dangerous, and in order to do this, one must have an enormous amount of courage. Along with the Vikings, we should also expand our thinking to not just Europeans, but also to East Asians. And quite recently there has been an effort to look at the voyages of Xing He, the great Chinese admiral. And there was a massive treasure fleet that was commissioned by the Chinese emperors. And this fleet dwarfed any kind of European ships in size and scale, but 100 ships, it is thought at least, went to traverse and explore the world. And Xing He was the leader of this voyage, and he went from China all around in Eastern Asia. He explored the ports of Indonesia, throughout India, all the isles of the Indies, and even all the way around to the eastern coast, down the east coast of Africa. And it's unclear whether he made it around the Horn of Africa, but he certainly did not make it all the way to Europe. What did Xing He hope to accomplish? What did the Chinese civilization hope to accomplish by this? Well, they wanted knowledge. They wanted to make great trade deals. They sought to expand their economics. And historians have thought that China, around the year 1300, could have entered into a phase of industrialization. That the civilization was at a point where it could have done that. It had the ability to do that, but it did not. And strangely, after these great voyages of exploration, this fleet was mothballed. The Chinese did not explore further, though they could have. They had better vessels. They had the finest navigators. They could have done what the Europeans did throughout the Pacific, but they chose not to because they didn't have to. Everyone came to China. China was the shining white city on the hill. Everybody came to China in order to get what they wanted. So China did not need to discover new ways to new places. They had no need of this knowledge because everyone would come to them, and they were a vastly rich civilization on account of this. But along with the Chinese, we also see that there were other peoples in the Pacific, other East Asian civilizations that expanded possibly as far as South America, reaching it through the use of very large canoes. And this was Polynesian peoples that we see now throughout the southern Pacific, such as in Fiji and Tonga, as well as Hawaii. And we see all of these people that are immigrating from the areas of Southeast Asia, the Isles of Indonesia, the Philippines, and moving towards South America. And it is some archaeologists believe, because we don't have a lot of or really any written records regarding this, but it's believed that they may have actually made it as far as South America, traversing the entire Pacific Ocean through island hopping, on simply carved out very large wooden canoes. So now let us turn back to Europe. So Europeans have an enormous desire to reach the Far East, which I will refer to as the Orient. This is the area that stretches from present-day Iraq all the way to Eastern Asia along the rich trade routes through India and the present-day the Isles of India, the East Indies, excuse me. This region was enormously rich in luxury goods, and this is exactly what the Europeans wanted to get. They wanted the sugars, the fine peppers and spices of the ancient world. And I would say, people sometimes, students ask me questions. Why would someone sail around Africa in order to get pepper or to get some of these luxury goods? Well, I would challenge you to make a meal and not use any spices, to boil some chicken and enjoy that day after day after day. And you will come to understand why people were willing to pay enormous amounts of money for these luxury goods. And you will then come to understand, when people pay this amount of money for luxury goods, why merchants were willing to take a chance, why adventurers were willing to try to get in on this lucrative trade. Because that is what Europeans are desiring. The upper classes are who is driving this exploration impetus. And the problem for Europeans is that they are at the absolute end of the supply chain. Now, the Silk Road, which I don't have a map up here of, but the Silk Road begins in the Jade Gate in the east of China, or in the the east of China, and it begins to move all the way down through the Kingdom of China, through India, through all of the Istan regions, the farthest regions of the Middle East or Central Asia, whichever you prefer to think of that as, and then throughout the Middle East, all the way to Constantinople in present-day Istanbul. From there, Muslim merchants acquired, especially after the conquest of Constantinople, Muslim merchants play an enormously important role, because they then are at the end of this long trade route that we call the Silk Road. It wasn't actually called the Silk Road until much later, in the 1870s. A German scholar renames it that. But before that, it's just the Great Trade Route. And not every caravan that leaves from the Jade Gate in China was a great caravan, meaning that it had 3,000 to 4,000 camels in it, and it was a trade mission that moved all the way from China to Constantinople. But this trade was one of mostly of regional exchange. So the Chinese merchants would bring goods to the great cities in the central steppes, or in the parts of Central Asia, the region of the Istans today, and they would take this to these vastly rich cities, these fabled places of luxury good trade, such as Bukhara, Samarkand, and they would then trade with other merchants there, and then these merchants would take the goods a little farther down the trade route to, let's say, Babylon, or the great cities of Persia, and they would trade there, and then there would be another exchange, and regional merchants would then take those goods all the way to the ports in Constantinople, where there was then another exchange between Muslim merchants, and then the Italians got their hands on things because they were the great traders. They controlled the Eastern Mediterranean and had monopolies on trade goods and trade deals between Muslim merchants and Italians. And these fellows, of course, then moved these trade goods to the rest of Europe. So Europe is at the absolute end of the trade route here. So you have to pay markups, just like in our own society. If a good passes through many hands, everybody is going to get his or her cut. So the Europeans really would like to bypass the Italian and Muslim merchants and go straight to the source for the goods, cutting out much of the inflation of the prices. They also had a desire to spread their religion to these regions of the world where it did not have a Christianity, or at least Christianity was not the primary religion of the area. Moreover, Europeans wanted to expand their own theories, right? That they had theories of how big the world was. They had theories of whether Africa ended, and they wanted to see whether they could prove these sort of academic theories that they had thought up in universities. Are they right? They quested for fame and glory. Could I be the first one to discover a trade route to China? I would be famous. I would be rich, and also that great quest for adventure. So here you can begin to see some of these voyages. And just take a moment, kind of look over this map here, that we begin to see the first voyages, and we'll come to look at this, but the first voyages that leave out of Portugal are ones that explore Africa. And they come around the Cape of Good Hope, and they make it all the way to India. Then they, of course, come. After this is done, there are many other voyages to the New World, as well as finally Ferdinand Magellan's circumnavigation of the world. He made it all the way around. So where does this all begin? Well, it all begins in Portugal, and the man called Prince Henry, the Navigator, is the one who is given credit with originating this drive for adventure and for discovery. And in 1419, he founds a college, a school of navigation for maritime advancement. And here you could learn to navigate, to use the latest advancements in technology, and he also employs cartographers, people to make maps of the regions of the world that they knew, in order to bring people together. That you have to be able to bring people together. When you don't have Zoom and things like that, you have to be able to bring people together to advance knowledge. And he brought the greatest minds of Europe together in order to find a way to cut out Muslim merchants and to cut out Italian merchants from this trade route. And he was a genuinely curious person. He really he wants to know and advance the academic knowledge of their time. And he sets out first the curricula for this. He asks the question, does Africa end? And can you reach India? Can you reach China by going around Africa? And finally, their goal is to perfect a ship that would be able to undertake a voyage around Africa if Africa ended. And that was the great question, because no one knew the answer to that. No one had ever sailed around Africa. Before this, you had to, of course, there was no Suez Canal. You could not sail through the Mediterranean to reach the Indian Ocean. That only comes much later in the 19th century. But you had to traverse land routes. You had to move goods across land, and in order to do this, you had to bypass, or you had to go through territories of controlling Muslim Fatimids or Mamelukes, or you had to pass through the Eastern Roman Empire while it still existed before 1453, or you had to go through the hands of Italians, who controlled vast amounts of the trade in the East. So it was believed in the sailing voyages to Africa, land exploration of Africa, which was relatively minimal beyond the very north of Africa in the Mediterranean basin to Egypt. Remember, you encounter the Sahara Desert, which is the largest desert in the world. And then you encounter the vast Congo rainforest. It was unknown. It was very unclear whether Africa ended. Was this a landmass that extended without bounds? So that was the question that they began asking. and they began undertaking shorter voyages that became medium-range voyages and longer voyages to discern and then make maps to found small little or to make deals with people along this trade or along the coast of Africa in order to be able to resupply, because it's so primitive of technology that on their sailing ships that they have to find ports in order to take in fresh water to resupply for food, because they really don't know how far that they are going to be going. So this is a gradual exploration, and they work intensely in order to be able to perfect their caravel, all right, their ship, in order to be able to sail. So they begin by using these triangular sails rather than just simply the square sails. And here you can see this is a typical Mediterranean vessel, which you would require rowing. And it would be much less sail power and much more rowing power. This is not ideal for crossing very large oceans because you just simply can't employ enough rowers because it takes so many people. Where in the Mediterranean, the storms are not nearly what you will encounter in the open oceans of the Atlantic and the Pacific. So much work had to go into producing the caravel. And eventually, Bartholomew Diaz, one of the explorers, is going to be able to go around the Cape, or he's going to be able to finally get to the Cape of Good Hope, that he's going to be able to turn his vessel to the east, and finally Vasco da Gama is going to sail around the Cape of Good Hope here. And this is taking place in 1488, 1490 to 1497. And Vasco da Gama, this is key here. This is really key, that he is able to find the Orient. He is going to be able to reach India. And he is going to bring back massive amounts of wealth. His one voyage to India is going to net him 60 times the cost of the voyage, right? The profits, he was going to make 60 times the cost of what they took on this one trade route. So very lucrative trade if you can make it. The only problem is that they don't understand yet the prevailing winds and the currents, and that there is this thing in the Indian Ocean called the monsoon shift. And you have to, in the fall, the winds will move one way, and then, of course, beginning in the spring, when the wet season comes around, you will have a complete change in the winds and the currents of the Indian Ocean. And you cannot sail against these currents when you have just a sail or a wind-powered vessel. So it takes more than a year for one to get to India and back until they have knowledge of the monsoon shift. And this is not something yet that Vasco da Gama has knowledge of. But it's very important in order to be able to move quickly back and forth, and it's virtually impossible to go around Africa. So it's difficult, and there's other competing theories. And one of those competing theories, so let's keep in mind here, as we go around Africa, it takes a really long time. It takes a lot of effort, and you have to traverse enormous amounts of people. It's a long voyage. It's a difficult voyage, and it takes a very long time. And let's go back here, because there are competing theories, of course. And one, Christopher Columbus, is going to ascribe to a theory that instead of going around Africa to get to the Orient, this region of the world, that instead it's much shorter. It would be much shorter just to sail as far as you can here to the west. So, and then he believed about right here he would run into China. It was a shorter voyage. He believed it was a much shorter voyage than what it was. He miscalculated by approximately 12,000 miles. But fortunately for him, he runs into to the Caribbean, and to North America, and it turns out all's well that ends well, as Shakespeare says. But as Portugal and Spain began to expand, keeping in mind here that people quickly come to take other people's knowledge, that once news got out that you can sail around Africa, that there is a new way to the east, other people began to explore as well. Other societies began to explore. So Spain and Portugal immediately kind of get into a rivalry on exploration. And there is great conflict among these two Christian powers. And in order to prevent a large-scale war between Portugal and Spain, the Pope intervenes. And the Pope says he has an idea, that he's going to draw a line down the middle of a map. And he's going to say, this is the Treaty of Tordesillas, made in 1494. And the Pope says that Portugal is going to get all the lands east of the Cape Verde Isles. Spain is going to get everything, all the lands, 350 leagues. A league is 3 miles. 900,000 miles west of the Cape Verde Isles. And this is why today, other than Brazil, all the other Latin American countries speak Spanish, and Brazil, they speak Portuguese. Because this was, if this longitude of the Treaty of Tordesillas, where they draw this line down the map, actually Portugal is going to get Brazil, and Spain everything else in the New World. Of course, the Protestant powers will not care what the Pope says, and they will begin taking over regions of North America, such as England, France, though France is, of course, a Catholic power, but England and the Dutch began exploring in North America, where there was not such a clear demarcation of what Spain controlled versus what Portugal controlled. But the Dutch and English, who being Protestants, cared nothing for the Pope's words and cut private deals with Spain, and this is how the English and Dutch end up along the coast of the United States, the present-day coast of the United States of America, then North America. So, we then need to talk just a little bit more here about Pedro Alvarez de Cabral. And he accidentally discovers Brazil. He's trying to go around Africa, and he gets a little bit off course there, a lot bit off course because of a storm, and he finds Brazil. And this was an important discovery, because there, to this point, was no knowledge that there was a South America, because Columbus had only yet been in the Caribbean. There had not yet been voyages down to the south of America. So in this Treaty of Tordesillas, in this discovery of Brazil, we see the creation here of empire, I think. Empire being territories controlled by force in many cases, or being in subjection to another power, and then the other power, the kingdom of Europe, having control over the land and peoples of these new land, at least in theory, at least having authority, maybe not yet power over these. But we see here probably the Treaty of Tordesillas could be seen as the creation of empire under Portugal and Spain. So now let us turn to our friend Christopher Columbus. And Christopher Columbus is going to come to prominence right at the end of the Spanish period of the Reconquista, that the Christian powers under Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain are just had expelled the Muslims from the region of Granada and the southern part of Spain. And Spain in the Middle Ages had been a power of the country of the three, or the kingdom of the three religions. the Jews, the Christians, and the Muslims. And they had got along in a relatively decent manner, and that they had thrived, that this had been an area of great intellectual foment, that some of the greatest minds in Europe came here to train and to study. And it was a cosmopolitan region, unlike the rest of Europe. It was a great place to work and study, and that the three faiths largely got along, or at least they tolerated each other to a much greater extent than anywhere else in Europe, though some scholarship has come to question this golden age of learning, as well as religious toleration in Spain. But nevertheless, the great Catholic powers and the most Catholic king and queen, Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain, who united in their marriage this kingdom of Spain under the crowns of them, of course, Isabella of Castile and Ferdinand of Aragon, becoming one kingdom. Don't think of nation yet. Nation is something that is different. This is a people who are subjects under the crown of Ferdinand and Isabella. And Christopher Columbus comes to be famous around this time. He comes to the attention of the monarchs with his theory. Portugal, remember, had found its way around the Cape of Good Hope, and they were making money. They were discovering new trade routes, and finally Isabella of Castile decides that she will take a chance on this Italian who has this theory that he could sail to China by sailing east. And he is not the first to have this idea. He's playing on an academic theory, but he is the one that says they have got the mathematical calculations wrong. And it's actually a lot shorter voyage. It's way shorter than what everyone thought. The world is not flat. The Atlantic Ocean is not infinite. To this point, in 1492, there was the question of, does Africa end? There's also a question, does the ocean sea, which we call the Atlantic Ocean, does it ever end? Now, it was not believed that the world was flat. This is, in intellectual circles, it's not true. And, as early as the year 100, Ptolemy, the great Egyptian thinker and geographer, had said that the world is round. Aristotle had calculated that the world was round. Nobody in the highest intellectual circles, well, I won't say nobody, but the vast majority of scholarly theory was that the world was round. It was not flat. But the questions were, do things end? Does Africa end? Does the ocean sea? Does the Atlantic Ocean end? And Columbus says, I'm going to take a chance. I have made better calculations. I'm a way better mathematician than everybody else. I'm smarter than everyone else. And I'm going to reach the Orient faster, and I'm going to be able to do it cheaper than everyone else. Give me a few $1,000s, and I'll be able to do this. So they say, okay, we'll take a chance on you. Here's some money. Go and sail, my man. So Columbus takes his three ships, the Nina, the Mina, and the Santa Maria, and he begins. They're very small ships, these caravels, and he begins to move his through the ocean sea, the Atlantic Ocean, and then he discovers something. He believes he discovers the Orient. He lands on the island of Hispaniola in the Caribbean Ocean, or the Caribbean Sea, and there he encounters people that he believes to be Indians. And this is why Native Americans are eventually given the name Indians, because Columbus is confused. He believes that he has discovered the East Indies instead of the West Indies. He doesn't believe he's in the Caribbean. He believes he's on the southern coast of India, or he's in Indonesia. So this is where Columbus makes his error. And in his journals, he records that he firmly believes that he has discovered the New World. He publishes books on this. He is famous for this. He makes 3 more voyages to the New World, and there is some historical speculation that he did realize finally that he had not actually discovered China or the Indies, but he certainly never in his propaganda claims that he did not do that. But he gives us great knowledge in his observations of the native peoples and sort of how the treatment of these people were and what they were in the minds of Europeans, and sort of a description of these early native societies within the Caribbean Isles. And even beyond. But Columbus is going to do a lot more exploring in the New World, but he certainly dies at least publicly proclaiming that he had indeed discovered the Orient, though he had not. And it takes 10 to 15 years for Europeans to fully understand the magnitude of what they had discovered in Columbus's voyage. That they had not discovered the Orient, that they had not found some islands that were off the Orient, but there were 2 massive continents, as large as Africa nearly, in this region, in this middle place between the Ocean Sea and the Pacific. So Vasco de Balboa is the man who goes and he traverses the coasts of much of North America, as well as finding a route down the coast of South America, where the seas are enormous and at great risk. He sails almost to the Pacific. Right, he gets right to around the coast of Argentina, present day Argentina, and he ultimately does discover that these are 2 new continents, and he brings this knowledge back to Europe, and this is what motivates Ferdinand Magellan. That he believes that he now has the knowledge. That yes, this is something on a magnitude that no one had imagined. No one had theorized that there were 2 massive land masses in between the Orient and Europe. And at this point, Europe begins to send over more and more explorers. More people are eager to come and have adventure, to find their fortunes, to seek fame, to seek wealth in this new place, this new world that they have discovered. And Ferdinand Magellan is motivated by this. He's one of these explorers, these exploradores, who are motivated to come and see if they could find the Orient. That if they could go around South America, or if there was a way, a passage that would allow them to find the Orient by sailing west. How lucrative could this be? And eventually Magellan is able to do this with 5 caravels, but Magellan himself dies on his circumnavigation voyage, and the world ends up being so vastly much larger than anyone had thought. That the Pacific was an enormous ocean, that they just had not at all imagined how big that the world was. They believed the world, European colleges and ancients believed that the world was just much smaller than it actually was. And the voyage takes vastly longer than it does. And as the lone ship that survives the voyage comes traipsing into the harbors of Spain, they are amazed by what they had found. But it is the knowledge here, the wisdom that they had learned from this, that allows future voyages to succeed and to change the ideas of how to navigate the world. That it's much easier actually to sail around Africa than it is to sail around South America. So this does change everything, but it also puts into perspective that there is a massive region of the world where you can find many new goods, that you can that you don't have to always go to the Chinese in order to find your wealth. You don't have to go to the East Indies in order to find wealth. That there is a new place that Europeans had never imagined, with enormous amounts of wealth, vast precious metals of gold, silver, and jewels. And this is largely within the three great civilizations of the New World, and that is the Aztecs, the Mayas, and the Incas. And the Aztec civilizations here in southern Mexico, present-day Mexico, here in North America, and then we have the Mayan civilizations in the Yucatan, and then the most rich of them all, the Incan civilizations here of Peru. So these people were great civilization in and of their own right, that they are part of this new world, that there is 50 million people, and these people have never encountered European powers. They have never seen these people, and it's kind of a thought that they believed that the Europeans were gods. Well, the Europeans were not gods, and the Native Americans quite quickly figured out that they were not gods. But they were very tremendously powerful civilizations in and of their own right. The great question here among Europeans were, well, why had they never heard of Jesus Christ? Why had they never had the gospel brought to them? How did they not know anything of God and Western religion? So this actually, it becomes tremendously problematic in later when this really sets in, that well if God had revealed God's self to everyone, why did these civilizations in the New World not know about it? Well, that then encourages missionaries to come and bring that to them. But that also promotes some speculation among deists that, well, maybe God didn't reveal God's self. Maybe we have to question this religion, and it causes doubt among religious motivations and great theological theories of Europeans in the 16th and 17th century, really the 17th century. But Europeans, as they come to encounter and explore and move throughout these new lands, that they discover that this place, these new lands, and especially the Incan and Aztec regions of the world, that they are rich, that they have vast gold mines, they have enormous amounts of wealth, and that they also come to note in their journals of exploration. We will talk about this in our next lecture, but these societies were not unlike European societies, that they were patriarchal. They had kings, they had hierarchies, they had priesthoods. They to some degree relegated women, and they were highly exploitive and warlike towards other societies. That they would subjugate other peoples, that they had slaves to some degree, that these people fought amongst each other, that there was endemic warfare among the Incas, the Mayas, and the Aztecs. And as I said, that they would enslave each other. So maybe this says something more about the human condition than our societies, but they were similar in this sense, that this was not a utopian place where people lived in great harmony. But in reality, it was a place that was very similar in many ways, at least on the whole, to European societies. They did not have the technological advancement that European societies had, and nor did they have immunity to many of the diseases that Europeans had. And why were Europeans able to survive? And because you would think that there would be an exchange of diseases here, that the Native Americans would have given Europeans diseases as well, but it just simply didn't work that way. That the diseases were far more deadly that Europeans brought to the New World and to the peoples of the New World, and we'll talk more about this next time. But this is a very important factor when they have contact here, that this disease that was brought. But the peoples of the New World, we have a problem. In order to understand them, we don't speak their language in the same way. They have sort of this pictographic writing that they have. They don't have alphabetic writing like we do. They don't write with A, B, C, D, E, F, G, or alpha, beta, gamma. Whatever language that we do. They didn't have alphabetic language, so they don't have writing in order for us to read their texts. They don't have. They simply have a kind of pictographic symbology. They would communicate through pictures in a way that we still really don't yet fully understand. Although scholars of the colonial world are working on trying to understand this as well as they can, but. Nevertheless, we struggle to understand, and we also are kind of biased in the sense that we can only know what we can discover from archaeology and some speculation, as well as the writings of Europeans who observed these societies as they have encountered them. So we will pick up here next time with Spain and the conquest of the New World. So we're going to see at the end of this age of exploration, and we're going to see a transformation from exploradors to conquistadors, so from explorers to conquerors of the New World. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.